Welcome back to the Brothers War EDH. My name is Ryan. You already know Chris. And today we have for y'all the last member of our crew. He joined us about a month ago. He's kind of a behind the scenes guy, but he is just as important as we are. His name is Blake. What's up, Blake?
Hello.
Yes. He's also one of our oldest friends, and we all used to live together, and we all at one point thought about making a channel back during those days, but we never did it. Kind of regret it, but we're here now. It took
Look at us
us
now.
like what, 6 years?
Something like that.
Yeah, it took us a long time to get to this point. But with that being said, we are going to go through our first set review, Dominaria United. Not the commander cards, just the set. And yeah, we got quite a number of cards to go through today. With that being said, we're going to go through Wooburg order, starting with whites. The first card we're going to talk about, Defiler of Faith. It is a 5-mana 5/5 with Vigilance. As an additional cost to cast white permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost 1 white less to cast if you paid life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of white mana you pay. Whenever you cast a white permanent spell, create a 1/1 soldier creature token. What do y'all think?
Well, spoiler alert, this is a cycle in this set. You're going to see one of every color. Important thing, I guess, to talk about here is basically every permanent you cast of this color, whether it be white, red, green, for the specific defilers, is going to basically cost you 1 Phyrexian instead. You specifically cannot activate this multiple times, so if you're casting something for 2 white, you can only ever pay 1 white and 2 life, and this does not trigger multiple times. So just special thing to note there. And it also is specifically permanents, an important thing to take note of there as well.
Yes. Do you feel that for this that when you cast a white permanent spell, creating a 1/1 soldier is worth the mana cost in the card slot? Depending on the deck, probably.
This is probably a good card, but basically you have to kind of think of these as their color of medallion, in my thought, because basically every white card is going to cost you 1 less white. So is that worth 5 mana plus making a 1/1 every time you cast a permanent? I don't think so, because if you look at the white statue from Amonkhet, it's effectively the same thing, and this is 5 mana.
Yeah, it's a good point. Wow.
So I would say this is an interesting card, but when you start breaking down its effects and look at the mana value, it's not that good.
Interesting
take. You
take.
have to have some really deep synergies with this for it to be like an all-star. I do think I agree with the Amonkhet reference. Oketra's Monument is probably going to be more beneficial.
I think you'll get the same effect for a much cheaper and more mana efficient card.
Right. I can agree with that.
Interesting. Yeah, well, that's the first out of 5, and we'll see which one comes out to be the best in the end.
The only what I will say the difference obviously is that you can cast like your mana door, or not mana doors, but like your 1 mana white spells with this, like Deafening Silence and stuff like that. That Oketra's Monument can't do that.
Sure.
But again, you don't really have. I mean, I guess you have like your Esper Sentinels and your Mother of Runes, your Giver of Runes, and Weathered Wayfarer, Sarah Ascendant, and stuff like that.
I think
you've already cast those spells most of the time.
Sure.
So I don't see it being like extremely.
The cost reduction comes too late.
Powerful.
Is what it sounds like you're saying.
It's a little too late.
Because when you look at your curve in a 5 mana, do you really want your 5 mana to be a cost reducer and then just make 1/1s? I feel like in most token decks, your 5 manas are your token doublers, your huge token producers, Cathar's Crusade, that kind of stuff.
I think this is just to be towards the end. Yeah, you want your payoffs to be towards the end and not your setup stuff to be at the end. So
agreed.
Okay. All right, the next card we're going to talk about on our white list is Guardian of New Benalia. It's a 2-mana 2/2 with Enlist. New keyword. As this creature attacks, you may tap a non-attacking creature you control without summoning sickness. When you do, add its power to this creature's power until the end of turn. Whenever Guardian of New Benalia enlists a creature you scry to, discard a card. It gains indestructible until the end of turn, and you tap it.
I just wanted to briefly talk about this card because cheap. I mean, you don't get too many cards that are cheap, especially in mono white, that have discard a card just stapled on it. And you could use this in like reanimator builds to put just a fat creature into the yard and then reanimate it. It's cheap enough for you to be able to cast it on turn 1 or 2 and then be able to do that on turn 2 or 3. Scrying 2 is about on rate as drawing a card, and in white, it's not. I mean, drawing a card obviously is hard to come by. So I just wanted to briefly mention this card to talk about. It could be a solid beater as you can give it indestructible, and yeah, being able to scry 2 and being able to scry 2, adding the ability to discard a card to and reanimator builds. I feel like the sum of all that makes this a fine card to play.
I like the option for discard for sure. I think that's in your Orzhov Obzon strategies, that's a very like effect that doesn't come in white, but usually I think you do have Reanimator and mono white where this might be a little more attractive, but I think in like those multicolored, you just have better discard options theoretically.
Yeah.
But this is definitely like, at least if nothing else, an interesting discard option that like if you were looking for it on a creature instead of an enchantment or an artifact or something like that, if you're specifically looking for a creature that gives you the option of discard, this is at least an interesting thought.
Yeah, I agree. It's something too. Is like in those like maybe like mono white, low to the ground weenie decks. It is a soldier and a human, both common creature types in those, and that's great too. Like you're saying, it's basically draw a card, and I know how much white sometimes struggles with drawing cards, and this might be a good option for you in those kinds of decks.
White usually tries to attach their card advantage in a lot of other ways, not really like drawing cards, but this is a good step in the direction, I feel like.
Yep. Hey man, nowadays White's getting just draw a card on it. Times are a changing.
Yeah, times are changing.
Times are a changing.
Man. All right, the third card, it is Sarah Paragon. It is an angel, 4 mana, 3/4 flying. Once during each of your turns, you may play a land from your graveyard or cast a permanent spell with CMC 3 or less from your graveyard. If you do, it gains when this permanent is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, exile it, and you gain 2 life. Man, they're printing so many angels these days.
That is true. Mono White Angels is starting to get a much better curve than it used to have. But to be honest, the person that should be looking out is Sun Titan. I think this card is like a lot more aggressively costed, has effectively the same upsides as Sun Titan, and doesn't need to get in the red zone. This just says on your turn you may do this. Mm-hmm. Does not have to get in the red zone. And then the other thing that everyone's going to be like, well, you lose the card when it dies. Well, if you're specifically in an exile or blink strategy, that re-enters. It doesn't say leaves the battlefield. It says go to the graveyard. So if you flicker this, it becomes a new object and stays forever. So
very important. Very important. I'm glad you brought that up, Blake.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Gosh. Yeah, this card's pushed. It's just very powerful. Very aggressively costed, like you mentioned, and I don't really have much to say about this card except it's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean that's why we got Blake on here, man. He just has all the answers. That was a beautiful description of that. Yeah, big fan of this card, and I actually thought about making a mono white angels deck, and this might get in there. I mean, well, Giada? More likely, huh?
Giada?
Maybe. Might be. Anyways, we'll talk about that later. Our last white card that we're going to talk about today is Temporary Lockdown. This one's spicy. A 3 mana enchantment, 1 and 2 white. When Temporary Lockdown enters the battlefield, exile each non-land permanent with CMC 2 or less until Temporary Lockdown. Yeah. mana value 2 or less until temporary lockdown leaves the battlefield. Sea layer mana rocks, you know, if someone's
Mana
got
rocks, treasures,
like
Tokens.
mana
mana
dorks.
dorks.
Yes.
It hits a lot of your early game stuff, and then again, the higher power levels you go here, it gets even more disruptive. Mana crypts, mox diamonds,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. It's very similar to if anyone's played Culling Ritual.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't get the burst of mana, so don't get me wrong. This is not as good as Culling Ritual in that scenario, but it is a very effective white interaction piece that comes down early and deals with a lot of non-land ramp and early mana dork generation.
Yeah. Yeah, I like how you brought up the higher power level because you know just imagine someone just dumping their hand of their mana rocks and you know you happen to also have like a fast turn and just like bam temporary lockdown, get rid of all your mana rocks, all your mana dorks, and then it's just like you set them back so much their hand's probably gone so they can't really you know they gotta like try to draw into more stuff, but it just man.
Well, and that's the beautiful thing
Yeah.
about it is since it's in your hand, you play around it. Now, I mean,
Right.
most people are going to be like, well, this exiles all my stuff. Well, you don't have to dump your hand down. If it's in your
Right.
hand and you see your opponent's going nuts, you hold back, you wait, turn 3, throw this down, then start your acceleration. Everybody's behind, and you've been able to hold all your cards in hand.
Yeah, patience, man. All right, we're moving away from white into blue. We got 5 cards that we would like to cover in blue. The first one is the Blue Defiler. Defiler of Dreams. 5 mana, 3/2 blue. The 4/3 flyer, Phyrexian Sphinx. As an additional cost to cast blue permanents, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost one blue less to cast if you play life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of blue mana you pay. Whenever you cast a blue permanent spell, draw a card.
3 favorite words of magic, baby.
Draw a card.
Yeah.
Easy.
It's definitely the best reward of all the defilers. If you look at the casting of the permanent or the permanent entry, the casting of the permanent, this is by far the most powerful reward you're going to get out of all the defilers, in my opinion.
Yeah. The problem is, how many blue permanent spells are people running in their decks?
Very dependent on the
Very
deck.
little.
Probably not as much as
Yeah.
the other colors.
Nope.
Yeah, Ristic
I think this
Study,
is more
Mystic
of like
Remora,
a-
and that's it.
I mean,
Sure.
yeah. I mean, I can't. I mean, yeah. Mystic Remora. I mean, your commander.
Yeah, your
I mean,
commander.
Like I said, there are
Uh,
very certain strategies that are going to love
Yeah,
this
you're
card
gonna-
specifically
yeah.
that are permanent based. So you've got like
right.
Muldrotha
feel like-
blue and Muldrotha blue enchantments, all that sort of that usually tries to stray towards permanence in that sort of realm. That's where this card's gonna
Right.
be the best. But again, it's the same argument we made for the white one. It's 5 mana, cost reducer. This payoff I think is better, but with the lower amount of permanence, like you play this in a is it spellcaster deck, it's gonna look bad. It's just not gonna do what you want it to do.
This is one of those cards that you want to build your deck and see if this fits in after the build is already done. This isn't
Agreed.
something that you want to start with with it in the list. But yeah, I mean, in the decks that it's going to be good in, I feel like it's a very powerful card. But I don't see that happening too often with mainly blue being a more interactive style of play.
Not having those blue permanents does kind of hurt this card, so I agree with both of you on this one. Then we're gonna move on to our next blue card. It's a saga, 2 mana, Founding the Third Path. What's cool about these sagas is that it has this new kind of like saga ability for read ahead, which you can basically skip a lore counter and go straight to whichever one you want. So this one says first lore chapter is you may cast an instant or sorcery spell with mana value 1 or 2 from your hand without paying its mana cost. The second chapter is target player mills 4 cards. And the third one is exile a target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard, copy it. You may cast the copy.
Big fan.
Yeah,
I'm one of the
notice-
ones.
yeah.
Go ahead, Chris.
I do want to mention the last ability. It does say you copy it and you may cast a copy. That doesn't mean you can cast it for free. You do have to pay mana cost, and just let you have to pay the costs of the card.
But yeah, I mean, this is just a nice little 2 mana saga that's like actually a decent chunk of value. Like, I mean, you're going 2 mana, hopefully casting a 2 mana spell. And then if you're in a deck that cares about your graveyard or milling things into the graveyard, you then target yourself, mill 4. Then on Saga 3, you can either recast the spell you just cast with it, or if you mill over something better or more interesting, you get to go into that. And then that spell does not have to be 1 or 2. You can very easily
Right.
drop this and do that. And then again, if you look at the read ahead abilities, you can buy back a very important removal spell, board wipe, anything to that degree where you can immediately cast this for 2 mana, read ahead, go to Saga 3, rebuy an important spell, and potentially save the game from a board wipe or get back a winning the game spell.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool that this card is only 2 mana. Because I was like, man, this is a lot for 2 mana. My gosh. Really
Like
cool card.
it's not flashy, but it's one of those cards that I think will put in a lot more work than you ever expected to put in.
Oh yeah, yeah. And just like the whole utility of being able to, versatility of being able to just skip ahead on some of those chapters. You don't have to go through, 1, 2, 3. And you just be like, all right, well, I want to go straight to 2, mill 4. I want to go straight to 3, copy this big spell, or whatever spell you want, and we love versatility in this game. So big fan of this card. Probably one of my favorite ones.
The read ahead mechanic is actually probably my favorite from this entire set because sagas are juicy for value lovers, but sometimes you want the third chapter, and 2 turns from now, the game's going to be over. You're just not going to get what you want, and that saga's going to look a lot worse. But these, you can supplant your value for that immediate effect if you really have to have it. And it is, like you said, versatility is basically the end-all be-all in Commander.
Right. Yes, sir. Well, speaking of sagas, our next card is also a saga. It is the Phasing of Zhalfir. 4 mana, 2 and 2 blue. It also has read ahead, which is great. The first 2 chapters are another target non-land permanent phases out. It can't phase in for as long as you control the Phasing of Zhalfir. The third chapter is destroy all creatures. For each creature destroyed this way, its controller creates a 2/2 black Phyrexian creature token. Wrath of God in blue?
This is a white card, right? This is a white card, right?
Yeah.
No,
Basically.
it's not. It's the blue card.
It's not.
Color pie breaks, baby.
I know.
Color pie
They love it.
breaks.
They love it.
We're up here pongifying for the whole board for 4 mana.
Yeah. You also get you also get to protect one of your stuff too.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's, if you want that immediate board wipe, bang, you've got it for 4 mana. If you specifically want to make it more one-sided, you play it, you can exile up to 1 or 2 of your own creatures and then have the board wipe. It's just that versatility is just, it's so good.
Yeah.
4 mana too, like it's
aggressively costed for what it does, I think.
Aggressively costed. Also, it's enchantment. You would probably use this in a lot of blue enchantment builds as your board wipe, and you can rebuy this with other effects that care about returning enchantments to the battlefield and stuff like that. So I feel like this card is pretty powerful, and it's blue, and I thought it seems like a white card, but yeah.
Estrid, Muldrotha, Shrines. There are a lot of cards that can very easily rebuy this and continue to exile their important creatures while continually wiping the board and leaving the table with a bunch of 2/2s.
An old favorite, you can cast this at instant speed with Wrath.
Oh god, yikes!
Yeah, that deck didn't last too long.
But it wasn't good.
It didn't. Before it looks like this is before Kamigawa and this. I mean, we've had a lot of.
No, watch out, Azoria Sagas. Chris is gonna make it work. Don't you worry.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. One thing that Blake brings up a lot, and for some reason, his Muldrotha deck just gets a card like every set, and it just feels like that the games are just gonna get worse and worse every single time. But it's a great deck. If y'all, that's a spicy deck. I wouldn't mind doing a deck tech on that someday, because it's it's a very unique one. It's one of his oldest decks, and it's just
his oldest deck.
It is literally literally my oldest deck. It's an Oops All Permanents deck, winning off Primal Surge and playing no spells.
Dude, look at that. You don't see that too many times. All right, well, Time to go into our fourth blue card. Chris, you brought this one up. It is the Micromancer. 4 mana, 3 and a blue. Human Wizard 3/3. When it enters, you may search your library for an instant or sorcery card with mana value 1, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle.
Yeah, this card reminds me a lot of Spellseeker, which I'm sure a lot of people know. Spellseeker are obviously better, but
Right.
you know, you got all your blink decks, you got your displacer kitten that just came out. I mean, and then you get a one C. Anytime you could search your library for a card, put it into your hand. It's always worth mentioning, especially if you're getting cards that always like this being in blue. There's a lot of 1 mana counters. There's a lot of you know, 1 mana cantrips that is always going to be a good target for. And then if you could build around it with Displacer Kitten or Blink effects, then it gets even better. And I think it's another good tool in the arsenal of being able to, you know, get those swan songs in your hand if you need it and stuff like that. So
I just can't help think of the meme when I look at this card, and it's like, "Mom, I want a spell seeker," and
Yeah.
you know we
Yeah.
have spell seeker at home.
yeah, yeah. I don't know if it's going to be
Awesome.
extremely powerful, but it's definitely a card that is interesting and could be powerful in the right build.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I
it's
definitely like the flicker target for sure.
it's like if you have a lot of ones, because you know it is just mana value 1. It's not like 1 or less. But you know, if you have a lot of ones, you know, I mean, you might. Would you play this in like your Abdul Candlekeep Sage deck?
Being that deck is a polymorph deck, I would not. I would rather have a. If I were to put another card in there, I would do an Archaeomancer, since
Mm.
that kind of lets me go infinite. But I didn't want to go that route.
Gotcha. So going on to our last blue card, Vesuvian Duplimancy. 4 mana, 3 and a blue, enchantment. When you cast a spell that targets only a single artifact or creature you control, create a token that's a copy of that artifact or creature, except it's not legendary.
It has a home specifically in Orvar. This is basically Orvar's text on an enchantment that then makes that copy non-legendary. So Orvar
Which
players,
it's huge different from Orvar, because Orvar doesn't make it non-legendary. So
correct.
Yeah.
But yeah, any deck that's basically casting spells on one thing, this card is, you know, basically doubles up the permanents that you're casting on. So, you know,
we will talk about later on. One of the cards specifically that I am that would be very good for this.
So these are your Zada effects, your Mirrorwing Dragons, that sort of thing. So like any deck that's doing that kind of thing, this enchantment is going to basically turn that deck up to 11, especially if it's making copy of legendary creatures. Because, you know, Orvar, with this on the battlefield, Orvar casting an Orvar makes a non-legendary copy of Orvar and just continues to loop and over and over again. So it just goes nuts in that deck specifically.
Yeah, 2, 4, 8, 16. All right, moving on. Moving on to our black cards. And we're going to talk about first what we believe, actually not believe, what we know is the best card in this set. What we know is the best card in this set.
Spoiler alert, Jesus.
Yes. Hey. It is Braids. Arisen Nightmare.
Go ahead.
3 mana. 1 and 2 black, 3/3. Legendary creature Nightmare. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life, and you draw a card.
Like,
extremely important.
I'll let you start. Like.
Yeah. This is
a topic.
This is my card right here. This is what Magic Wizard said. Blake, we're gonna print you a card, and it's this one. It's, you know, absolutely insane. It's aggressively costed, provides large card advantage or mild interaction depending on what's going on. So again, the important part to recognize here is it says for each opponent may do this. And if they do not, they lose 2 and draw a card. So that's not a 1 card a turn. That is up to 3 cards a turn. On the turn it comes down. So it is an insane amount of value for very little cost. And just to demonstrate that, let's take the worst case scenario. Let's say you have 3 mana and you cast the Braids and you have nothing else. sacrifice a land on turn 3. Almost no player at that pod is going to be willing to sacrifice their land. So that is a 3 mana draw 3. Everybody lose 2 at the worst case scenario.
Yeah, plus
And
if,
it gets even better from there.
Yeah, but plus if they do sack the land, I mean, you're going down.
That's
lands.
what I'm saying.
Yeah,
You're interacting if you're not drawing cards. So it's either you are effectively dealing with board presence. Now, granted, you're probably getting their worst thing of that type, but that adds up, especially if it's enchantment, artifact, land. It's, those sort of things people can't afford to sacrifice. So you're almost always going to get the card draw off this.
right.
One thing I wanted to talk about this card is how well designed this card is, and I really hope that Wizards wants to press into this a little bit more. It's not a commanding kind of a stacks piece; it's more of a suggestive stacks piece. It makes it to where the opponent has to choose, and I really like that. I really like that how Wizards is trying to do that is we're making them choose between, one side of the coin or the other side of the coin, and it gives you a slight benefit for them choosing, something that's not as hard of a stacks piece. And I really, really, I just love the design of this card. It's so beautiful. And spoiler alert, this is the commander that I will be using for our gameplay. And I've been very impressed with it. I've been trying to find probabilities of people being able to sacrifice things, and then like Blake said, the worst case scenario, you just sacrifice a land. Nobody's sacrificing a land for the most part.
At least on turn 3, let's put it that way.
Right,
No.
right. So yeah, this card is it's just a beautiful card.
Gosh.
I really hope Wizards decides if they wanted to do something that leans into more of those really hard stacks pieces. I hope they do it in this way, because I think that's brilliant.
Well, and that's the important part here, is that obviously giving your opponent a choice is bad because they're going to choose what's best for them. But in this scenario, it's the duality of choice is bad in both scenarios. Right. So it's either you have to lose board presence, and you have to start losing board presence at an extremely early stage, especially if it's commander, or you have to let them get extremely far ahead, and it affects the entire table. It's not just one person. Because if this was, sacrifice the thing, one person has to do that, then you're only drawing one card, only one person's getting affected. It's a lot less interesting. This is not only an entire board effect, but it is not, it's interaction for everybody, or it's card advantage from everybody. It's just, it's good on almost every axis I can think of.
Yeah. I mean, because like, I think about commanders like this. I'm like, man, what if someone got this out on like turn 1, or but like they'd have to go and like maybe like last for it to be the real juice.
Well, one dark ritual, and this is out on turn 1.
Yeah, dark ritual,
Jeweled Lotus.
Yeah, Jeweled Lotus.
You got plenty of ways to get this on turn 1.
Yeah, dude. And then no one can sacrifice, so then you're literally just drawing 3 cards every turn until it's so good.
Yeah.
Shout out to the stained glass of this card as well.
Oh my gosh.
So beautiful.
Yeah, it's very, very probably the.
Be prepared to see this card in your commander. Your commander pods.
You know what? Favorite card of the set. My personal choice for best card in the set, and the prettiest card in the set. The stained glass version of this. I
haven't done enough research on that one to agree with the prettiest, but best and favorite, I agree.
Yeah, it is a great card for sure. All right, going into the next black card we got here is Cut Down. 1 mana, instant. Destroy target creature with total power and toughness 5 or less. I remember when I first saw this card, I was like, man, this card is crazy. But then Chris gave me more perspective. He's like, well, Dismember pretty much would do, it just kind of just does better, because like, with this, it's like destroy. It's like, what if it's indestructible? But in the end, though, like, it's pretty efficient, I would say.
Yeah, I'll start with this one. I think Cut Down is one of those cards that is a good card. However, it's kind of like in the same boat as all the other 1 mana instant speed 1 black pip cards like Fatal Push, Ulcerate, Dismember. It's kind of along the same lines. It's not really much better, and it has its cases where it could be better. It also has cases where it could be worse. But when you're looking at like I think for the most part, you're gonna be more happy with, any of these, 1 mana, cards, and you don't want to fill your deck with a ton of them. So they're kind of just like in like a little pool of those same effects and stuff like that.
The reasons I put this card on the list is that first off, I like the design space. I think they're getting very creative with removal spells because they have to be, and I think this is like a very interesting way to make a removal spell flexible without like just talking about mana value and that sort of thing. And then also, I think this is quite a good budget option as well. I think on those two axes, this card is very interesting.
Yeah, it's always good to have those budget options. But moving on to our third black card, it is the Black Defiler, Defiler of Flesh. 2/2 black, a 4/4 Phyrexian Horror, has Menace, and it has the same ability as the other ones as far as the mana reduction. This one's ability says whenever you cast a black permanent spell, a target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains Menace until the end of turn.
This one's the oof.
This is the oof.
This is oof because 4 mana Menace with that ability, and then your benefit is +1/+1 and Menace. Ugh. This is unfortunately the bad one of the cycle, because if anything, just play Keurig if you want the mana reduction, and you can do every black pip for all your cards instead of just one, and then you don't have to worry about the bad effect when you play permanents. I don't know why this is bad. Not good.
I feel like this is going to be a fine constructed card. I don't think it's going to be good in Commander. Also, one thing I wanted to mention is if they put, it's not really that important to talk about it because they didn't put this text on here, but I feel like this card would be pretty good if the ability was target opponent discards a card.
Man,
I'd be way more interested in that. Absolutely,
that'd be so good.
Absolutely.
Golly.
I was going to say target opponent. If we're talking about other constructed formats, I think target opponent would be like maybe. I think that would be you'd be in like scary territory at that point because literally you land one of these and then you start playing black permanents and they never have another card in their hand.
Right.
Scary.
I do like that though. That sounds nice.
Yeah.
That sounds nice.
Yeah, they might. Just gotta go talk.
Don't like
R&D.
this card. Love the art. Hate the card.
Love the art. Hate the card. I gotcha. All right. Moving on to our fourth black spell. Shieldred, the Apocalypse. 4 mana, 4/5. Phyrexian Praetor. Death Touch, whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life.
Shieldred has taken an interesting turn from where she originally started. Used to be a big chunky 6/6 with Swamp Walk, and now here we are caring about when people draw cards and you draw cards. It's a very interesting swap for her, but I will say 4 mana, and this is quite a good payoff in wheel decks, and if your group hug deck is in black that's making them draw cards, I actually think this is a very efficient and pretty good payoff for those kinds of decks.
Yeah, this card's really good. I love the flavored the flavor text on this. Gix failed. I shall not.
Yeah, like I said, I mean the flavor of Phyrexia and reinvading Dominaria is beautiful. It's it's exactly what you want to see from a lore nerd perspective.
Yeah.
But just very interesting where the turn that Shieldred has here, especially considering they basically removed her torso and put her on an obliterator. So it's very strange that she's also 4 mana and a 4/4.
Yes. Yeah, I love this card. I thought about making this my commander for the episode, but then I was like, well, I feel like if I had this as my commander, I would just be killed like super quick because I mean everyone likes drawing cards and they'll just die quicker if if this is on the field, especially when you're playing those cards that like those like group hug, everybody draws card spells. So. But yeah, this card is really good. I like it. I
feel like this card is like deceptively good. I think that it's one of those cards. It's like it's one of those cards that sits there and it's not like very oppressive initially, and it doesn't draw a lot of attention. But I think the time you care about it the most, it's going to be too late.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's basically is when you start to notice that this has killed
Right.
you, that it's killing you, it's already killed you, basically.
Yeah.
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 Because you're going to lose 10, 12, 14 life, and you're like, man, I'm kind of at 16. I
Yeah.
can't really start taking life anymore.
Right.
But the card's
Yeah.
already done its damage at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nick, you
Or you're just
saw.
going to get wheeled, and you're going to take a huge
Yeah.
hit.
All right, moving on to our next card. Shadow Prophecy. 3 mana instant, 2 and a black. With Domain. Look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of basic land types. Among lands you control, put up to 2 of them into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. You lose 2 life. Chris, you brought this card. What's good?
Yeah. Anybody here ever heard of divination?
I have.
This card is in 2 or more colors. This could be easily 3 mana instant speed. Draw 2 cards. You
Yep.
lose 2 life. In black, and that's not insignificant.
I mean,
And
Night's
also if you
Whisper sees play, so I mean,
Yeah.
you know.
yes.
True.
But just being, I mean, you put 2 in your hand and then the rest into your graveyard. So if you have synergies with that, you can also, take advantage of the graveyard synergy. I think this card will be fine. It's a common, so it's not going to be that powerful, but it is a pretty decent card draw spell, probably a good budget card draw spell, and it's also instant speed. So
Especially good with the first Triumph cycle and then the Houses cycle from New Capenna, so it's a lot easier nowadays to have your basic land types to actually trigger your domain with not needing to play the basics as much.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
very easy to kind of have those the domain triggers there and make this card better than Night's Whisper. So I do very interesting in that. I very like the Resco in the graveyard, because I think if you're like the 3 to 4 color reanimator mill graveyard strategy, I think that's where this card gets interesting.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely a versatile card with that graveyard synergy. Interesting. I did not know this card was even a card until you brought it up. Cool. All right. Moving on to our last black card. Shadowrite Priest. It is a 2 mana 2/2 human cleric. Other clerics you control get +1/+1. You pay 3 and 2 black, you tap it, sacrifice another cleric. Search a library for a black creature card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle.
Yeah, Shadowrite Priest. When you look into the more competitive scene, what is it ran by? Timna the Weaver, right? And what is she? She's a cleric.
Yeah.
So, generally, or like being able to sacrifice Timna, being able to find yourself a Razaketh, put it on the battlefield, sacrifice the Shadowrite Priest, get a card. That's a lot. That's not insignificant either. That's something to look upon. You always have access to Timna in the command zone. I feel like this is. It's also easily tutor. I mean, it's easy to activate under a rule of law, so you don't. I mean, it does cost 5 mana, but I'll pay 5 mana for a Razaketh. You know what I mean? So. I think that it's got some implications. I don't think that. I mean, obviously, if you're playing a cleric deck, it's going to be great. There are some competitive clerics around, like Yawgmoth. So it's. I feel like it's going to be fine.
Just generically, I mean, also the other thing is obviously Temna wants creatures, they want attackers, and this actually makes Temna bigger too. So you are actually, this makes Temna easier to attack. You gain more life, so you're, not that that's super important at the more competitive tables, but could make your ad nauseum go longer depending on what's going on. So this is actually, you brought this to my attention, and this is actually a lot more interesting than I originally gave it credit for, because that 5 mana cost is just, and sacrificing a cleric is just, I was like, oh, cleric tribal, whatever. But the fact that Temna's a cleric, Yawgmoth's a cleric, I think that makes this card a little more interesting than I originally gave it credit for.
Sure. Yeah. It is a really interesting card. Did not think about Timna or Yawgmoth being a cleric until you brought it up. Because normally, you don't really think about the creature types, but being able to find a card and potentially fitting it into a competitive deck these days is a unless the card is just straight up, just like straight up like, oh, this card is just too good not to play in those high power decks. But being able to use a card like this in a deck like that is interesting to bring up for sure. With that, we're gonna wrap up the black cards, moving into red. The first one we're going to talk about is the Red Defiler, Defiler of Instinct. 4 mana, 2 colorless, 2 red, for 4 Phyrexian Kavu. With first strike, it has the same ability but for red. Whenever you cast a red permanent spell, Defiler of Instinct deals 1 damage to any target.
Chris and I disagree on this particular juncture, but I'll fight for this one. I think this is the best Defiler. First off, you've got 4 mana, 4/4 first strike. That's kind of an insane stat line for the mana cost that you're paying for it. Obviously, you have the discount here, and then red permanents dealing 1 damage to target. I don't know how Chris isn't vying for this one, considering all his decks deal 1 damage to permanents or put 1 -1/-1 counter on permanents, and he's seen how abusive and annoying that can be. So I think this card, for that reason, and then also something you may not kind of think about, but when you start getting into combat, if I play my red permanent and ping Chris's 5/5 and attack him with a 4/4 first strike, it's not blocking with that 5/5 anymore. Yeah. So I think this card looks worse than I think it's going to play, because coming from a play group with Niv-Mizzet and pingers and that sort of thing, one damage to my mana dorks and my utility creatures is a lot more annoying than people give it credit for.
That's fair. I do think it's the second best. We'll get to what I think is the best.
It's okay to be wrong.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
Which, I mean, spoiler alert, we only have 1 color left. Hello.
Yeah.
The green one is good, but the red prevails.
Yeah, I do agree that just its costs for the 4/4 first strike, and then you get this ability plus the discount. It's just a lot of value on this creature. I also like the art. The art's really cool for this one.
The Kavu.
Dude, who doesn't love Flametongue Kavu?
Dude, FTK, man.
But turned into a Phyrexian.
Right. Ooh. It's been completed.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, moving on. Moving on to our second red card. All right, moving on to our second red card. Keldon Flamesage, 3 mana, 2/1 red for a 2/3 human shaman with Enlist. Whenever Keldon Flamesage attacks, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is Keldon Flamesage's power. You may exile an instant or sorcery card with mana value X or less from among them. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. You may cast the exiled card without paying its mana costs. We like that.
I just wanted to mention this card because okay, when you're looking at the higher power tables, you're gonna have a huge density of 1/2 CMC or mana value instants of sorceries. Being able to enlist something and make its power greater, and then being able to dig deeper into there and try to find something to cast for free is not bad. It's not bad. I think you'll find a lot of targets for the most part. I think on base level it's fine card. It's probably not gonna be played in it's gonna be in one of those decks that is a little bit more build aroundish. I feel like I don't think that this card is amazing. I just wanted to mention it.
Art is interesting. Like, it's but the problem I feel like is it's pulling in a lot of different directions, which is something always to look at when you're identifying a card. So you've got to look. So the Enlist ability that wants an additional creature, but this is casting instants and sorceries equal to power. So you're like in a weird it's pulling you in 3 different kinds of ways where you want to have this power be increased, which hopefully comes from the creature, which means you want a creature with a decent power. It's asking for a lot of things to then cast a spell for free. I think there is maybe a deck somewhere that wants this, but I think it's like very niche case, and then you're also just kind of hoping to get lucky off the top with at least anything you can even cast here. So, well, I do agree that I think at mid power tables, I think this card's going to look bad. But at higher power tables where there's not as many blockers, and this might be able to get more than one attack in, maybe this gets more interesting.
Yeah, the problem is you got to find a cut for a 3-mana creature like this.
Yeah.
Also true.
So it's probably not that great.
I think the card is interesting. It's just
It's interesting,
it's
but
pulling in
probably not
weird
great.
directions.
Yeah.
All right, our third and final red card. Phoenix Check. 1 mana, flying haste. It can't block. It's a 1/1. Whenever you attack with 3 or more creatures, you may pay 2 red. If you do, return Phoenix Check from your graveyard to the battlefield, tapped and attacking with a +1/+1 counter on it.
Yeah, this is your obligatory. Is this a Winota card? 1 mana, 1/1 flying haste. Can trigger Winota real easily, and also can return from the graveyard easily. So yeah, I mean, it almost acts like Blake mentioned before, a reassembling skeleton in that factor. And yeah, it's got a lot of text for a 1 mana card.
Yeah.
Specifically in the Winota deck, it's definitely good. It's that 1 mana haste immediate trigger. That's a beautiful thing in that deck. And then even after a board wipe, when you're trying to reassemble, and if you only have humans or something along those lines, it can very easily attack and come back. And like we said with the reassembling skeleton, this also can act as your Bloodghast, reassembling skeleton, something to that degree, if that aristocrat stack is more on the attacking side of things. So this card is interesting. I'm not sure where exactly it fits, but those archetypes, I think, are where if you're going to see it, it's going to be in one of those.
Also, being 1 mana is always something to look for in a card like this as well. It's just very efficiently costed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that some, well, I mean, I'm not sure how many of them play this card, but I think a lot of them play Raging Goblin, which is just the 1 mana 1/1 haste. And this is just like pretty much the same thing.
Basically, strictly better than that. Yeah. So I mean, I think this definitely sees play in very specific decks that are looking for that type of effect.
All right, we're done with the red. We're moving on to green. First green card. It is the last Defiler, the Green Defiler. Defiler of Vigor. It's a 5 mana, 3 and 2 green, 6/6 Phyrexian Worm with trample with the same ability, the mana reduction for green. Whenever you cast a green permanent spell, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control.
Yeah. Let me take this one. So Blake took the red one. Let me take the first stab at this one. This is what I'm looking for in the Defiler, being as it is the payoff at the end of the this is what you want to be casting after you've already set up your board. You can start paying your life into it and then buffing up your creatures that have already been on the board. And being a 5 mana 6/6 trampler, also being in green because green has a lot of permanent spells. You're gonna want to generally green is going to be full of permanents. So I feel like this is the card that you're the effect that you want out of your Defilers, and the reason why I think that it's the best Defiler.
Can't really disagree with the analysis here. It's exactly what you want in terms of your payoff. It is good, but I think the red one is the one that people are going to sleep on. The green one's obviously good. The red one is
what I really like about the red one. What I like about the red one is that it is 4 mana, so it kind of rides that line of being a setup and a payoff.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, the card by itself is just good in all areas. You know what I mean? Like you can cast it late and it'll still do work. You can cast it early, it'll still do work. So you might. There may be some room in convincing me, Blake, but I just feel like the
green one's by far the easiest to trigger, and that payoff is it will end games if you're not careful. Yes. So, like I said, I think the red, the green, they have some good things going for them for sure.
Yeah, I'll say this about this card too. It's just a 5 mana 6/6 trample is always a good rate, and even in like the late game, it's like if you're like top decking and you draw like a mana dork, it's like boom. You play this, your whole. I mean, if you have a board, your whole board just gets a +1/+1 counter. So it's just, and like if you can like ramp it out, it's in green, so you're in the color to ramp it out, and then when that's out, then all your other green spells also cost less. Yeah, this card is really interesting. If I were to choose between the red and the green one, I I like how the red one, like, you can get the red one out earlier than this one, and you can like ramp out with that one. It's like, let's say you happen to play that, and then you played a red permanent spell, and then in the same turn you like pinged like a mana dork or something like that. And then eventually you can
Yeah,
start just getting more value over time. But
yeah.
they're both really good.
You can say the green one; it won't hurt my feelings.
No. I mean,
No.
they're both, like, to me they're both like equally really good, but the scenarios where
Yeah.
where like each of them can
Honestly,
shine.
I'm starting to.
Trying to go towards the
I
red
don't
one.
know if I'm changing. I don't know if I'm changing my mind or not because being able to cast the red one on turn 2 or 3
Yeah,
is that's pretty
yeah,
solid.
Yeah,
that's
like
that's
going
crazy.
mana rock into this on turn 3, following up by like 1 to 2 red permanent spells is
Killing dorks off. That
killing
seems
Yeah,
dorks.
pretty.
Your cards are cheaper. Like I said, I think
man,
this looks innocuous, but I think this card's like sneaky good.
Yeah,
gosh,
the red one is definitely. I feel like the red one shines early game. The green one shines late game.
right,
Absolutely,
right,
100%,
right.
100%.
All right, moving on to our second green card, Threats Undetected. It's a 3 mana sorcery, 2 and a green. Search your library for up to 4 creature cards with different powers and reveal them. An opponent chooses 2 of those cards. Shuffle the chosen cards into your library and put the rest into your hand. So for me, when I see this, I thought about my Seaton deck because, for one, I run a ton of creatures in that deck, and a lot of them can serve multiple purposes, but after talking with Blake, I think one of the biggest drawbacks of this is that normally, depending on your board state, your opponents are probably going to choose the cards that you actually wanted instead of the cards that you needed. But at the same time, though, 3 mana, put 2 creatures into your hand. You can't really beat that.
Again, the
Well,
biggest problem
I'm
here.
sorry, you can, because there's better cards in this, but
Sure. I think the biggest thing to look at here is you can't just go get 4 creatures. You have to go get 4 creatures with different powers. So the way to make these, obviously this is a spoof off of Gifts Ungiven, Intuition, that sort of thing. So the things that make those cards powerful and why some of them are banned in our format or other formats is because you can make the opponent's choice not matter. In this scenario, that's a lot harder to do because, first off, the cards that are chosen by the opponent get shuffled back in, and the other caveat is that you have to choose creatures with different mana values, or sorry, with power values. And in that scenario, if you're trying to go get a combo piece, it's very hard to have 4 combo pieces that are different powers. It's just a lot harder to make this card work than it like a Gifts Ungiven or
yeah.
Intuition, that sort of thing. That's my big problem with this card.
Yeah, the piles have to be, the cards that you choose, if you're trying to do something specific, yeah, trying to get those creatures with different powers can definitely be difficult. And oftentimes, if you happen to find 4 cards that have different powers, what are the odds that you're actually going to get? I'm still going to try it in that deck because I do have a lot of creatures in there, and they all do vary in different power levels. And because most of them are like elves and druids, they're gonna serve some kind of purpose for me. So I'm gonna try it out. I think it's worth trying out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that you have to have obviously you have to have a density of creatures in there with different powers, but I think it also depends on kind of like I guess the card quality as well.
Sure.
Like if you're trying to play an archetype, like a specific archetype, like a hate bears archetype, and you're just trying to find specific stacks pieces or certain stacks pieces, there's a lot of them that do the same thing at different powers. If you're trying to find, like Ryan said, the base of that is just 3 mana draw two creatures. That's not terrible. So I mean, I don't know what to really think about this card. I think that it's going to be okay. Uh, I don't know.
I think just
It's
the second you start giving your opponent's choice with the choice being not like breakable, like gifts ungiven, where obviously the cards go to the yard, which you can then interact with. I think this card just gets a lot weaker because if people are using their detective skills and know probably know which two creatures you want, are probably going to give you the worst of the pile.
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
I can definitely see this card being as one of those where it's like everyone's like, oh my gosh, this needs to go in like every green deck that I have. But you know, due to the reasons that like we've talked about here, I think that it's going to be, people are probably going to be slowly disappointed by it if they don't know what they're doing. They'd be like, oh well, I'm just going to find just random creatures and just put them into my hand. Which I mean, that rate,
Divination's not the worst card.
yeah, yeah. But like this way, you can find somewhat creatures that you might want. So it's like, it might, yeah, I don't know, you never know. All right, moving on to our third card in green. And this card is actually, I think this card might be my favorite card in the set. It's not the strongest one. Well, I'm sorry. Well, sorry. Braids is my favorite card in the set, but this one is probably my second one because it's just a powerhouse. It is Silverback Elder, 5 mana, 2 and 3 green for a 5/7 Ape Shaman. Whenever you whenever you cast a creature spell, choose one. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a land from among them onto the battlefield tapped. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. You gain 4 life every time you cast a creature spell. And so sorry, go ahead.
So I just want to say that this does not belong in your 3+ color decks.
Oh.
If you're playing this in 3 or more colors, you got better options. The 3 green pips is going to be hard for you to cast on turn 5, higher, maybe even turn 4, even in the green decks, because you just it's 3 green pips is a lot harder to cast than a lot of people think. I don't think that you're going to be using the abilities of looking at the top 5 cards, getting a land, and gaining 4 life that often. I think you're going to mainly be using this for an artifact to destroy an artifact or enchantment. And if you're in green-white, you probably want to play Aura Shards instead. So yeah, I think that this card it's fine. I don't think that it's going to belong in even every mono green deck.
Mono green, I think, is definitely where this card is like at its best. I think because again, the detracting factor for me here is that you have to cast the card, and the lands enter the battlefield tapped on the ramp, so it's kind of hard to go nuts with this card. So it's really just like a 1 to 2 turn benefit. Now, I mean, you are going to mow down some artifacts and enchantments with this card, which I think I've always been a proponent for interaction and seeing what people have for that sort of thing, because people's game plans fall apart very quickly the second you start throwing things at them if they're not prepared for it. So I think this card is very interesting in that sort of scenario, in that color pairing. But like Chris said, I think the second you start adding more colors, I think this card's overcosted and has too many green pips to really be relevant.
Yeah, I thought that this card is just like it's a fun card. It's fun.
The 5/7.
Yeah, it's a 5/7 for 5, which is it's a pretty good rate. And like I just like coming up with like scenarios in my mind where it's like, okay, it's like you have this and you just start just dumping a bunch of creatures and doing a bunch of cool stuff and like the 4 life might not be like insanely relevant, but you cast 3 creatures, gain 12 life. I mean,
there are games where life gain is more relevant than anybody ever thinks. And I mean, like I said, when you're looking at an Elves deck or like the Seaton Druid deck, the amount of creatures you can cast in one turn, there are not going to be any more artifacts or enchantments on the battlefield. So I think this has its places. It's just in more niche decks than it may first look, because the card just kind of looks generically powerful. But I think on further inspection, it's a little more niche than that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if this was a druid, I think I might try it for fun. I don't know how like well it'll do, but since it's kind of like a druid ball type deck, it might do some stuff. But it is kind of expensive for that deck. But yeah, cool card, cool art. I'm a fan of that. It's cool.
Oh, the
All
art
right.
is cool. He does have no neck, so
Yeah. All right. Moving on to our fourth card. It is Tail Swipe. It's a 1 mana instant. Choose target creature you control and target creature you don't control. If you cast a spell during your main phase, the creature you control gets +1/+1 until the end of turn. Then those creatures fight each other. I will say
Yeah.
one thing about green. After making a green deck recently, it's hard to deal with creatures in mono green. There's some
Yep.
cards in there, like I have like Kenrith's transformation and stuff like that. But overall, it's like fighting is like probably one of the best ways to like deal with stuff. So,
yeah. Instant speed
yeah.
preyed upon.
Mhm.
Effectively or efficiently costed instant speed, and if you cast it during your main phase, you could just swipe some bodies.
Basically,
So
has
I,
the addendum mechanic from Guilds of Ravnica or whatever it was, where if
Yeah.
you cast it on your main phase, you get an extra benefit. I think that is definitely interesting.
1 mana instant speed green removal spell seems pretty good, pretty slept on. I feel like this could be a card that we see a decent amount of.
I mean, efficiency is getting to be the name of the game in Commander. So
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
if you're specifically in a deck with like decently powered creatures, this is like as efficient as it gets for
Yeah.
removal.
Yeah, just like Galta is just what I see when I see this card. It's just crazy things like 1 mana and your your 12/12 is fighting anything that's like under that, and it's more likely going to kill whatever
I mean,
it's in its way.
looking at it for Hepatra, being able to give fight something with my Death
But
Touch
yeah,
Snakes
with
for 1 instant
Yep.
speed green mana seems.
yeah,
I mean, that's better than cut down. That's better than we talked about all those different black. That's green too. Like when I saw this card, literally just not that long ago, because I didn't know this was a card in the set.
yeah,
I was like, wow, this seems a lot. This seems pretty good.
yeah. That is the Tail Swipe. Moving on to our last green card that we're going to go over today. It is the World Spell, 7 mana enchantment saga, 5 and 2 green. It does have read ahead. The first 2 chapters are look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-saga permanent from among them, put into your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. The third chapter is put up to 2 non-saga permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield.
It's very, very expensive. I don't see you doing the first 2 abilities all that often. I feel like you're going to be doing more of the last ability. There is, an argument to play Tooth and Nail over this, which I understand. But there are cards that return enchantments to the battlefield, like we talked about with the blue Destroy card, that can have some additional benefits to playing this over that. So Estrid, that returns, enchantments to the battlefield, Go Shintai, stuff like that. So you can do some cute things with this card. I don't think it's insanely powerful.
Hey man, my Oops All Permanent deck can't play Tooth and Nail, so this is my next option.
There
you go.
Hey,
There you go.
there we go.
There you go. Got the option there.
But yeah, I think synergy is where this card really probably shines, because I think just generically playing this card with no enchantment synergies, no graveyard synergies, that sort of thing, I think it's just not where you want to be, because again, it's mostly random. You're putting a card from your hand onto the battlefield. When building deck, you have no idea what that card's going to be. So I mean, is the worst card in your hand a 3-drop? You paid 7 mana for that, so obviously that means you want to not read ahead. So it's just, I think the scenarios where this card is good are varied enough to where I think you have to be building around synergy to have this card be worth a slot in any deck.
Yeah, I agree. All right, that will do it with our green cards, and we're gonna jump into the multicolor cards. I want to start off by just saying this really quick. This set has a lot of multicolored cards, specifically multicolored legendaries. and we only have 5 cards that we're gonna bring up here. But for most of those cards, they can be able to fit into, they can be used as a commander, or some of them have actually a lot of them have legendary synergy, so you can probably be able to like use a lot of them in those kinds of strategies. But we wanted to go over just the cards that we saw, and we wanted to we wanted to bring up here, as the majority of them were because there's a there are a lot of good ones in there that we're not going to talk about here. But if y'all wanted us to talk about those and maybe like a separate video, we can, because there is a lot. But starting off with our multicolored cards, the first one is Alice Ilcor, Sadistic Pilgrim. 1 white, 1 black for a 2/2 Phyrexian Core Cleric. Has Death Touch. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. Whenever another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life.
Reminds me a lot of Suture Priest combined with like the effect of Massacre. So this is like basically it's a half Soul Sister, half Zulaport Cut Through. So I think like in Aristocrats deck, Soul Sister, Life Gain, this is a card that is like an innocuous 2-drop that not only blocks well because of the Death Touch, but is also going to put in a lot of damage over time.
Yeah, not many cards that like combine those 2 aspects, which is really interesting. Yeah, it's like Mihawk Massacre is an example that combines those kinds of effects, but now you get it on a creature, and it's an Orzhov. You could use this as a commander, but it's probably just going to go in probably the 99 somewhere. And yeah, it does block well.
Yeah.
Because it cares about your creatures entering and your creatures dying, whereas, like, for example, Suture Priest cares about other people's creatures entering and yours entering. Zulaport only cares about yours dying, so it's just got an interesting combination of those effects that I think is, like, actually quite good for just the 2 mana cost.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to our second multicolored spell is Urtai Resurrected. It is a 4 mana Phyrexian Human Wizard, 2 colorless, blue, and a black, 3/2 with flash. When it enters, you choose up to 1. Counter target spell, activated ability, or triggered ability, its controller draws a card. Or destroyed another target creature or planeswalker, its controller draws a card. All Urtai's bag.
So this one, I think, basically is, Chupacabra and Mystic Snake got together and created this one. So, again, versatility is beautiful here. Obviously, the only concern everyone's going to look to is, but my opponent gets to draw a card. Funnily enough, if anyone's familiar with CEDH tables here, this is a hose to Thoracle, because when you Demonic Consultation your deck away and cast the Thoracle with no cards in your library, or you can then flash this in, deny the Thoracle trigger, and draw them a card, which immediately loses them the game, which I think is hilarious. But
that is hilarious.
It's beautiful design.
It's also a lot harder to counter in CEDH because it's a creature. A lot of CEDH decks like to toy with non-creature spells. So,
absolutely.
It's it's also kind of ironic because this is a Thoracle deck. Because
true.
It's black, blue, black.
If you played this as the commander, you are also in Thoracle colors. It's also kind of funny.
Yeah. So.
Other than that, for like your mid-power decks, I think like if you're in a deck that's running Chupacabra or Mystic Snake and can run this card, I think it is worth considering cutting one of them for this, as that versatility is just like beautiful. Even if it draws them a card, this is very quick. This can stop a Craterhoof Behemoth trigger that's going to lose you the game. This can kill a commander that's going off. It's got a lot of versatility and can be flashed in, obviously. So I think this is just an all-around solid card that's not going to break any formats or anything like that, since it's very like fairly costed at 4 mana, but will put in work and save games.
Yeah. Moving on to our third multicolored card set. I'm actually a big fan of this card as well. It is Miria, Scholar of Antiquity. 3 mana, 3/3 elf artificer. 1 red, 1 green. Tap an untapped non-token artifact you control at a green. Tap 2 untapped non-token artifacts you control. Exile the top card of your library. You may play it this turn.
You got Urza in my gruel.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. The way I see this is it reminds me a lot of Urza. You play it in like a slower stack seer build that breaks parity on the Winter Orbs, the Trinispheres, stuff like that. And it also has a little bit of card, draw on it. So it's definitely an interesting card.
It's a slightly fairer Urza, in my opinion, because
Yeah, right.
you don't have the win condition also on the card. But again, like some people are gonna see this card and be like, "Oh, let's build a sweet artifact deck," and everybody's just gonna assume you have Winter Orb and Static Orb in it, and you're gonna get hated out of the table. So it's a lot like people that tried to build fair Urza and got hated out because it's just this card is very good at abusing those specific artifacts and tapping those 2 artifacts to let you play a card off the top. So it's just like there's so much synergy there that it's just hard to not do that. So it's I love the card, and I like that like artifact in red and green is very interesting, which is why I like specifically your red green artifact deck, Chris. It very reminds me a lot of that, where you're like playing around with very interesting synergies that you don't see in artifact decks very often. But this one's going to play very similar to how Urza plays.
Plus the irony of tapping a Null Rod for a green mana just makes me want to laugh a little bit.
Sure, beautiful.
Breaks it. Gets around those effects. Moving on to our 4th multicolored card, which this one, in terms of commander, is multicolored. Timely Interference. It's 1 blue, instant with kicker, 1 in a red. Target creature gets -1/-0 until the end of turn. If this spell is kicked, that creature blocks this turn if able. Draw a card.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring this up specifically for Blake. Obligatory. Is this a Krakashima card? 1 mana cantrip. What do you think, Blake?
Interesting. So specifically in Kirk Sakashima for CEDH, you're already playing enough 1 mana cantrips for this to be not relevant, and the kicker of having a creature block is almost always not relevant for you either. So I would think just it being a 1 mana card, I'll draw 1 card with no other effect, where I'm playing Opt, Preordain, Ponder, Brainstorm. It doesn't make that cut there.
Sure. I had to bring it up. 1 mana cantrips that always got to be talked about.
Absolutely. At this point, 1 mana cantrips are so good that they have to be like absolutely insane nowadays to even be considered for the cut.
True. Moving on to our last multicolored card, which I think is probably one of the. This is a wacky card. It is Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief. It is green and blue for a 2/1 fairy rogue, flying. When a player casts a spell that targets only a single creature other than Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief, you may copy that spell. The copy targets Ivy.
All right, Chris, tell me why this is good.
I'm not going to tell you why it's good. I'm going to tell you why it's interesting. So this is your new Zana. You're going to create a lot of non-legendary tokens of Ivy. The first one you do, and then you start chaining cantrips. You start chaining. What you can do is you can target it with enchantments. You can bestow upon it. You can mutate upon it. You can just create all those different kinds of tokens that attach upon Ivy. And I feel like it could get out of hand, and it officially costed it 2 mana. I feel like it's a card you want to get out early, and it's not one that you want to already have set up. So this is one of those cards that you want to, kind of take advantage of early. And I feel like it is going to be kind of like a snowball effect. You have tons of Parallel Lives, Doubling Season, Ajax and Niv, double token effects. You could take advantage of tokens a lot very easily in blue-green. I feel like this deck has a lot of designs, like it opens up a lot of design space, and I like that about this card. I think that Wizards did a good job printing this card. We'll see how powerful it is, but it's definitely very interesting.
We are specifically talking about making copies of the auras that you're casting on other creatures that then come to Ivy, correct? Just to make sure I'm on the same
Right.
page you are.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That is definitely interesting and fun to note that you didn't mention. It says whenever a player. So when I cast Swords to Plowshares on somebody else's creature, you can have it target Ivy and get it out of there.
And get out of there. Hey, Swiftfoot
Get it out of
boots. Swiftfoot boots.
Or I don't have to. I don't. I may.
No, you may, but you should do it.
You should do it. You should.
But yeah, it gives Simic something that's not Merfolk +1/+1 counters. Create a lot of tokens and stuff. I mean, you do create a lot of tokens here.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, good stuff.
Draw cards,
yeah,
land,
it's aura tokens. That's like an interesting new space. But
right.
But yeah, like I said, not obviously you wouldn't want to copy the Swords to Plowshares, but same thing for anybody who like is casting spells that target non-Ivy. You can make copies, so it not even your synergies. You could possibly steal somebody else's, which is interesting.
Yeah. The first time I saw it, I was like, man, I gotta read this card like 3 more times and figure out like what kind of deck someone would make. But then after you explained it right there, I was like, man, like. It sounds like that it's going to be a pretty popular Simic commander, considering that a lot of them do very similar stuff. All right, so we are done with our multicolored cards. Moving into the colorless, the mono brown. My color, man. Love it. The first one is Karn Silex. 3 mana artifact, a legendary artifact. It enters the battlefield tapped. Players can't pay life to cast spells or to activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. You pay X and tap it, exile it, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X or less, activate only as a sorcery.
Pernicious Deed, but a hate piece. I mean, what's not to love?
Yeah.
I think from a stacks players thing, it's half of Yasharn's hate piece, which I will say I do think it's the worst half of Yasharn, which is my one complaint about it. But not being able to pay life turns off a decent chunk of things. So no Necropotence, no fetch lands.
No fetch lands.
Yeah.
This is an effective hate piece at 3 mana. Yep. And but also on top of that, if it's not doing anything and there are problematic things on the board, you can very easily Pernicious Deeds the board away here. Notably only as a sorcery, so it does get slightly worse on that effect, but I think the combination of removal and stacks piece is quite interesting here and is efficiently costed.
Yeah, I agree. Even if it comes to play tapped, it's like it's still going to be doing work, and like even though you have to you would have to exile it, like it is a lot for 3 mana in colorless, and you can play this in like whatever kind of stacks deck that you wanted to. It doesn't matter what the colors are. So
interesting thing to note on Karn Silex is that you can pay 0 into it and destroy all tokens if you needed to. You don't have to. It doesn't say that you have to pay at least 1 in the mana cost to do that. So
yeah, interesting.
Get out of here, treasures.
Get out of here, treasures.
Moving on to our second colorless card here. It is Relic of Legends, a 3 mana artifact. Tap, add 1 mana of any color. It also has an ability: tap an untapped legendary creature you control. Add 1 mana of any color. And Chris, you brought up that this is basically just like a better Power Stone.
Yeah, I compared this to Worn Power Stone because it is a 3 mana. Basically, you're gonna get 2 mana off it most of the time, maybe even more. It doesn't come into play tapped. You can tap it for any color. It's going to be fine. I mean, it's going to be better in the Legendary Matters decks, but I do think that in mid to high power, maybe even high power, depending on what kind of build you're doing, this is going to be a very efficient mana rock for you.
Like I said, I think with no synergies alone, this is arguably better than Worn Power Stone because everybody has a legendary creature. It's the whole point of the format. So this is Worn Power Stone that doesn't enter the battlefield tap in most scenarios. And then the second you're playing Calamax, Magda, something that cares about being tapped, this gets even better because they don't have to get in the red zone, which most of those decks are attempting to avoid until a certain time. So the added utility of being able to tap specific creatures, obviously legendaries, but I think that is where this card actually gets like very good.
Yeah, and it adds colored mana instead of colorless mana.
Exactly. Like
Yeah,
Shaku.
Yeah,
it's
Like
crazy.
Shaku did.
yeah.
Yeah,
This is your best. This is probably your best 3 mana artifact ramp spell.
yeah. You also get like even if you have like partners, you can have both partners out. Just tap them both, make some more mana. There's just a lot of cool stuff to do with this card. All right, moving on to our third colorless card of the set, Weatherlight Completed. 2 mana 5/5 legendary artifact vehicle with flying. As long as Weatherlight Completed has 4 or more Phyresis counters on it, it is a Phyrexian creature in addition to its other types. Whenever a creature you control dies, put a Phyresis counter on Weatherlight Completed. Then draw a card if it has 7 or more counters on it. If it doesn't, you scry one.
I want to like this card so bad. It's like everything I want as an aristocrats and like sacrifice player. I just don't. It's the problem with it is there's a lot of setup to get where I want it to be. But I mean, at baseline, it's gives you a Viscera Seer effect, which is pretty good. And then you get to 4 counters, and it's a 5/5 flyer. Which I mean, Sarah Ascendant is, can put in a lot of work, and this is just a two mana cost card. And then eventually, if you get to 7, that's where this card really starts to hum. But I think the problem with it is once you start getting to 4 counters, it's now open to most removal spells in the game, board wipes. I think this card, unfortunately, is just going to perform not as well as I want it to, but I really love the card. I think it's like extremely cool flavor, has no crew cost, but as a vehicle, like I want to love this card so much, but I feel like there's just a lot of things that are pushing me away from it.
One thing I do want to mention about this card is that it is colorless. You could run it in the decks that don't provide a lot of card advantage, such as mono white decks, green white decks, giving it a little bit of extra oomph in their card advantage suite. It is only 2 mana, so it's efficiently costed. It can be a heavy beater and eventually draw you some cards in those decks. So I think it'll provide some utility somewhere. But like you said, it is a little bit of a hard setup, especially if if you're playing like those aristocrats decks. I don't know. You probably have better options than this. I feel like it's gonna be more along those, it's gonna give a bolster to those decks that need a little bit more card advantage in those colors.
Yeah, I mean, even in those colors, usually the card advantage cards are more expensive. The problem is, I think you're going to be able to get those online before this actually has 7 counters on it, because having 7 of your creatures die is kind of a large amount of creatures to actually turn this on, which is why, like, while I want to love it so much, I think it's got a little too much setup cost to actually be like really good.
Yeah, you probably want to use this in like a token matters kind of strategy where you're creating just a ton of creature tokens and stuff. So
yep.
Yeah, when I first saw this,
maybe you want to hold off. Maybe you want to sandbag this card until you are able to take advantage of it.
That's an interesting strategy. Yeah, because you could, like you said, have basically build up a very large board state, and drop this and wipe the board yourself. And this is not a creature while that resolves, but then gets all the counters from your creatures dying, and then bang, you've got a 5/5 flyer.
Like what? You scry like 5 and then draw 2 cards. That seems.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not bad. Not bad.
Yeah. So that's an interesting application, is kind of sandbagging it instead of just using the efficient cost to just put it on the battlefield immediately. That is actually that is interesting. So, like I said, there's some interesting play to this card. I don't know exactly where it's going to land. I want to really like it, but I'm just afraid that it's just setup cost is going to be too long in most games.
I'll test it for you, Blake. I'll test it for you in Carter and see how it works out.
Much appreciated.
Yeah.
It's also a thing, like, you don't care too much about sandbagging it because like it's just 2 mana. Like it's just so efficiently costed. Like it's an interesting card.
Yeah, when I first saw it, I was like, man, I kind of wish that the numbers were like switched. If it had 4 more counters, then you start drawing after that, and then if it had 7 or more, then it becomes a creature. But then I was like, well,
that'd be big game. I'd be all over that. That's a lot more tenable, but obviously makes the card a lot better.
Oh yeah, for sure. And 2 mana, it's like
5/5 flyer is also nothing to scoff at.
That's what I'm saying. Like, Sarah Ascendant just straight kills people if they're not careful. So I mean, it's nothing to shake a stick at here.
All right, going into our last colorless spell, but in our format, it's actually a 5-color card. One of the most talked about cards that I've seen in this set so far. It is the Timeless Lotus, 5 mana, legendary artifact. Enters the battlefield tapped. Tap it to add Wooburg. I remember when Chris showed us what was to come in the set, and one of the things listed was another Lotus, and I was like, all right, I love artifacts. Give me, Jewel Lotus came out, in Commander Legends, and I was like, all right, we're gonna be getting another Lotus. Let's go, let's do it. And then,
Is this what you wanted?
no.
What do you mean?
I mean,
Voltaic Key
hey,
on tap? Let's go.
Voltaic Key untap, Manifold Key untap, Clock of Omens. Let's go. No, I'm just kidding.
That's what I'm saying, brother. Like,
Hey, I mean, it for the flavor, yeah, it's cool. The art's really nice too. But it's I would just rather play something like Gilded Lotus, honestly, because it's the same mana, and yeah, it's 2 less, but you can play that in any deck, and it comes into play untapped. So I was like, to me it was a letdown. But all the 5-color people out there are probably like, all right, this is great. So
I don't know. I think even in 5-color, generically, this is just not that good of a card. You're tapping 5 mana that's enters tapped. Unless you're playing artifact synergies, that's basically all you're doing that turn. You go an entire another turn cycle, and someone has the Gorilla Shaman, targets this. How do you feel? Aura Shards, target this.
Oh yeah.
It's just, I think without synergies, this card looks horrible.
Yeah, this card's poop.
In bad case scenarios.
This card is poop. Sure.
Plus, it also has to be in 5 colors specifically.
Yeah.
And it only generates 1 of each color. So in most 5-color decks, you're not, outside of Slivers, where all their legends are 1 of each color. I think this card is going to look kind of awkward. I think where, basically, 5-color artifacts where you're abusing the fact that this is an artifact and tapping and untapping, that's where this card is going to be even remotely playable.
I gotta make that deck. It's gonna be my magnum opus. 5 colors, man.
The commander.
Yeah, see, I don't know.
That's what
I
you
do not know.
decide.
My gosh, I'm sure that they'll make a 5-color commander that synergizes with artifacts someday, but that'll be a talk for another day. But yeah, that's probably one of the cards that I feel is the most disappointing in the set, and it's also a mythic. It's like
Yeah, that's the real tragedy. Is this should have been a rare? Why is this a mythic?
Imagine opening up your pack and you get this, and you're just like,
I guess somebody's happy about it.
Oh, yeah.
It's just not. It's probably not me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell us what y'all think about Timeless Lotus in the comments, because we're not really a fan of it. But we're done with our colorless spells. Lastly, we wanted to go into the lands. We only have first we have a group of them, and they are the Pain lands. Classic lands that are getting reprinted. Very, very good lands. Blake, I believe I believe you had something to say about these lands, Blake.
All right, people, listen here. These are OG duels if you're willing to take a little damage. These, looking at EDH Rec, these are so far down on the list from where they should be. But Sulphurous Springs hasn't been reprinted in a long time. We're getting a beautiful full art treatment on all these things. I better see these numbers come up. These things are so good in 2 to 3 color decks. And people are just not playing enough of them. Look at your OG duels. Enter on tap for that color. These enter on tap for that color, lose a life. Battle Bond lands, enter tapped unless you can have 2 or more opponents. What if you only have 1 opponent? These don't have that stipulation. These are so good, minus the fact that they cost you life. And just in our format, life is a resource. Play these lands. They're so good.
Yeah. These are definitely I'd probably put them under Battle Bond lands, but I think that
I think they're they're 3rd or 4th for me in terms of cycle of lands.
Yeah. Well, you got OG duels, you got shocks, you got the
Fetches.
Battle Bond
I think fetches.
/ Commander Legends. Oh, sorry. Well, I'm talking about like the the colors or the
Oh,
lands that
okay.
produce 2 mana.
Sure.
You have the Battle Bond lands, and then you have these pain lands. And
I would say that's fair. If we're discounting if we're discounting fetches, I would say that's fair.
So yeah, play more of these. What's
Yeah,
wrong
very
with
good.
y'all? Take some life. You got 40 of it.
Yeah, take the life, man.
That's what I'm saying, man. Everybody's so afraid to take one. Let's go. You spend that life.
Yeah, I mean, you
gotta
already
spend money to make money.
Yeah.
That means
yeah,
you gotta
you
spend
do.
life to take life, okay?
Yeah, and plus, like, people already play, like, Mana Confluence and City of Brass and those, but, like, those do make one of any color. But, like, it's like, you would play this over probably some of those other garbage dual color lands. I mean, I've seen people play just like the straight up, and it's about what are those? You like gain a life, but like they enter tap.
The Karoo lands, I think, is what they're called. For
Yeah.
the gain life.
Karoo lands are the bounce lands.
Oh, are those the bounce lands? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, they gain lands. That's what they're called.
Yeah, it's like I see him play those, and it's like, well, they're playing tapped, so that's.
I will say, don't get me wrong. You look at some of the prices of these pain lands, especially this cycle that's coming out, like the Adakar Waste and the Sulphurous Springs were in $15, $16 territory. So this reprint.
Dang, really?
Yeah, dude.
Wow.
Sulphurous Springs is insane. That was one of the more expensive pain lands of them all. So the reprint is very well appreciated.
Also, huge shout out to the artist who did the callback to the old
Yeah.
goblin.
Oh, the goblin
in the spring.
in the hot tub.
Yeah,
Yes,
the
sir.
goblin
Yes,
hot tub.
sir. Yep, the little skull that's sitting there representing the old the old devil.
Gosh, yeah, that's nothing like a callback. That's beautiful. But going from those, we only have two other lands that we wanted to talk about. The first one is Plaza of Heroes. It is a rare. You tap it for colorless. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast a legendary spell. You can tap it to add 1 mana of any color among legendary permanents you control. And you can pay 3 to tap it, exile it. Target legendary creature gains hexproof and indestructible until the end of turn.
What a wild ride I've had with this card evaluating it. When you first look at it, it looks like Command Tower. This goes in every deck. Then you step back, look at it, and it looks more like a Mox Amber. So maybe do I even want this card? In some scenarios, this is just going to tap for a colorless if I can't cast my commander and have no legends. I still don't know where I've exactly landed on it. I think I've landed somewhere in the middle where I think this card in certain number of color decks is basically Command Tower and is going to look good, and then in your higher color decks, it's going to be significantly worse.
You hit the nail right on the head for me, Blake. Low color decks really want this card. It's going to be a staple in low 1, 2, maybe even 3 color decks. 4 to 5, I don't think you want this card.
I will say there is something to be said for a colorless card that can pay me 3 mana and get rid of to protect the commander. So like in Muldrotha, I run Command Beacon just because the card is so good. Now granted, I can recur that one, but I think there is also an argument for a colorless land that can protect the commander as well. So that's why I like this card. Is it plays on so many different axes, but is like good in some scenarios and bad in some scenarios. I think this is a really good design card because there are going to be some decks that really want this. There are going to be some decks that think they want this but don't want this. That's why I really like this sort of design method. I think is very interesting and hard to evaluate.
Yeah. The holding up 4 mana, this being included one of them, to protect a creature is a little rough.
Sure.
I don't think you're going to be activating it all that often.
No, probably not.
So I think that the probability, the thing you want to evaluate on is the probability of you being able to use the mana effect, or you use the mana. And I just feel like, the 3 and the 4, or sorry, the 4 and the 5 mana or color decks aren't going to really care too much. It's easily cuttable among the suite of lands that you need.
I would be inclined to agree. I think that's a good place to land on this for now. And if I'm proven wrong one way or the other, it's either unplayable or basically a staple at this point, which I hope not, because then it's just going to be a $25 card.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think
I will say this is a slam dunk in my Light Pause deck, 100%.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm probably gonna put it in my Karn deck. Just straight up, just makes the mana. It has the ability. I mean, I also have other. Well, I mean, actually, all I have are monocolored decks except for one, so I could have it all in there. You never know, but I might look into that. So actually, we have two other lands instead of one, to end it off. The first one is Crystal Grotto. When it enters the battlefield, you scry one. You tap it to add a colorless. You can pay one and tap it to add one mana of any color.
Yep. Simple, easy little common to add into your low color decks. Prismatic Lens on to a land attached to a land that doesn't come in tapped, and you scry when it enters the battlefield. I think that it's fine. It's probably easily cuttable, but when you get into the low color decks, especially the monocolor decks, you're going to be looking for this card. I feel like because it could be a slight upgrade over just a regular basic land, especially when you have plenty of basic lands to choose from, or to that you're going to have a density of basic lands.
This reminds me of exactly Zulfir and Void from Dominaria, where like in one color and zero color decks, it's literally a land that enters the battlefield untap and scries one. And getting any value from your land slot other than it just tapping for mana is always a good thing. So this is a interesting little common in, like you said, the low color decks.
Yeah.
Going in Karn.
Squeezing out a little bit of value out of there. Like I said, not being able to come in untapped is huge. Obviously, if it came in tapped, it would be a absolutely terrible card. But
yes.
But yeah, this is definitely something to look at in your low color decks, even in high power low color decks like monocolor decks. So,
all right, the last land we're going to talk about today is Thran Portal. It's a rare gate. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control two or fewer other lands. As it enters the battlefield, choose a basic land type. Thran Portal is the chosen type in addition to its other types. Mana abilities of Thran Portal cost an additional 1 life to activate.
Yeah, so this is another additional gate to those low color gate decks. Obviously, it's kind of like a gate confluence, if you will. It doesn't have to come into play tapped all the time, which most gates do. I think there's one that doesn't come into play.
Basically, all of them come in tapped. I think you might be right that there's one or two that don't or have stipulations that don't.
I think Baldur's Gate comes in untapped, but like this one has a chance to come in untapped. You're gonna want it in the there's a new gate commander, a Sultai gate commander. You're gonna want this in there. Special shout out because gates have been getting some support recently, so it might be interesting to look into for a more casual build if you wanted to do that.
Yeah, it's an additional gate for the old plaza.
Yeah. Like what's funny about this?
Mazes and all that good stuff.
Yeah, maybe eventually the gates will stop coming in tapped, and then it'll be a viable gate strategy.
I would prefer that to just not be the case. Let's just let's keep gates where they are.
Yeah.
My thing is about this card is why do they have to add the fact that your mana abilities cost you a life to activate? Like this land comes in as I mean it's a gate, and then it comes in as a basic land type of your choosing, but it only comes into play untapped if you control two or few other lands. So it's like, did y'all have to make us lose life
for only tapping for one color?
Right. It's just something extra. It's just like why.
Honestly, I had to read this card a lot when it first came out. I'm like, does this not tap for more than one color? Gates usually normally tap for more than one color, and this also loses me life. So I think this one's in a very weird spot unless I'm misunderstanding how it works.
Yeah, it's just another gate.
Basically,
it's just a slightly upgraded.
It's a gate that can possibly enter untapped. That also loses life. I don't know. This one's a weird one for me.
Gate confluence is what I'm calling it.
Yeah, but it doesn't tap for any color. So that's the whole point of being a confluence.
Right.
It taps for the color you want, and it pays a life.
What if I want all the colors, Chris? It doesn't tap for that.
You're too greedy.
Be greedy when others are fearful. Warren Buffett.
Wow.
All right. So, with that being said, that is going to wrap up our, the cards that we wanted to talk about from this set. Just to get y'all's opinions, what are y'all's overall thoughts on the set? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you think it's too weak?
Lore perspective, I love this set. This is like the culminate. This is like our end game right here. This is like the Phyrexians coming back, invading a home that we actually care about. Because when we were like first seeing them, we were going to Scars and seeing the invasion there, and we're a little more pulled back from that site. But this is like Magic's home that's getting invaded by Phyrexia. This is like, from a lore perspective, this is a 6 set. From a card quality perspective, this is I would say a like 5 to 6 range. There's some cards that I like for my decks. There's some very powerful cards, and then there's some toned down cards that I think could have been a little more. But overall I like the set.
Nice.
Yeah, I would say that this set is definitely toned down. I feel like the legendaries, especially the uncommon legendaries, are a little bland in their design. So I would probably say card quality is lacking a little bit, but there is a couple of interesting things. And like I said, I do love a specific couple amount of design spaces that they leaned into, and I hope that they do a little bit more of that, specifically braids, ivy, stuff like that. So
yeah, cool. I agree with y'all.
Which leads into our last question. Question of the day.
Yeah.
We want to know from you, what is your favorite card of the set? And what do you think the most and what do you think is the most powerful card in the set? Comment below. My personal answer, favorite and most powerful in my opinion, is braids. That is just, I mean, I don't want to ramble on it, we've already talked about braids, but I love that card. So Blake,
you don't even need to ask. Come on now.
Yes sir. All right, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, braids is just so good. It's hard to not have that card be your I mean as far as being a favorite, it's like any card could be your favorite, but it's definitely in my opinion the best card in the set.
So your favorite is the silverback, but you feel like the best card in the set is braids.
Yeah, I'd probably say so. I also like phasing of Zafir. I think that card is it's interesting in a color that is normally not. It's like destroying all creatures in blue on an enchantment is just like, that's just such a unique kind of card. So
yes,
I would definitely put that one up there. Oh, also too.
Let me cycle that with Muldrotha against you and never let you have another creature -2/2s. Let's go.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I will say though, some of the cards that like we haven't mentioned, obviously Jorah. I'm a fan of Jorah. I like it just does artifact stuff. The classic artifact stuff.
Classic Ryan.
Yeah, classic Ryan.
Classic Ryan.
And a lot of the legends, like what you're saying, they were pretty much underwhelming. Like when I was trying to find a commander to make for the set, every time one of those legendaries popped up, I would read it and I'd be like, oh my gosh, like I just can't use this. And then one after another, and it's like all these are just not that great. So then finally got my deck ready though. We're gonna be having our gameplay episode for Dominaria United coming up pretty soon. But yeah, like what Chris was saying, comment below, your favorite card from the set, your thoughts on the set, and do y'all have anything else that y'all want to bring up?
Tell us things tell us like if you disagree with us on some of the analysis that we gave.
Let us know what your favorite cards are and what you want to see from us.
Yeah.
So it's I'm glad y'all got to see Blake, and anything else?
You get to hear me talk a lot.
Yeah, we love Blake. Great analysis. With that being said, we hope you all have a wonderful day. Hope you all enjoyed this video. If you happen to like this content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, all that jazz, and we will see y'all next time.